Welcome back to part 2 of incorporating feedback. This half of the lecture is appropriate for when you don't have professor feedback. What do you do in that circumstance? Well, one, you can, like I said in the other half of the presentation, you can seek feedback. You can do, you can go to the professor and see if they're able to give you feedback. You can, and while not on here, you can email me. Um, I don't like to necessarily cross wires with the professors on style and how they like things expressed, but I can give you general comments for sure. You can also get feedback from study groups that you participate in, and also through self-assessment using a model answer and your outline. So study groups are a really useful tool when you don't have professor feedback. And by study groups, of course, I think you're probably all participating in one. If not, it's really just a group of, I don't know, 3 to 5 peer colleagues who are sharing the same experience as you and who are struggling through the same issues. I always found study groups to be great because I could articulate my understanding and correct it if it was wrong. Other people understood different aspects of things. Now, what can you do with the study group? Well, you can give your answer to another member of the study group to comment on. Now, are you going to get authoritative commentary from your colleague? Maybe, maybe not. But what you're certain to get is a different perspective. And so if you take the approach of sharing answers within a study group and providing comments on that, you of course want to be diligent in reading your own before going to remind yourself of what you wrote and remind yourself perhaps of what you didn't do well upon retrospective analysis. But the other thing to make sure that you do is be diligent in reading other people's work. You want to prepare for the meeting and you want to remove pride from the situation. You aren't your writing. And just because someone is giving you feedback, it doesn't mean they're smarter than you or going to be a better attorney or anything like that. It means they have a different perspective. They may understand some things better than you. You may understand some things better than them. But the keys here, I think, are to be humble in receiving feedback from peers and to be generous in giving feedback. Take the time and read it. Give real feedback. And don't let pride mess with you. There's a good quote from Pulp Fiction right before Butch's fight about pride that I won't recreate here from Marcellus Wallace. But pride can do nothing but hurt you in this circumstance, either with feedback from your professor or colleagues. Be open, be humble. When you're in the study group, you want to discuss and clarify. You want to discuss your essay responses. You don't want to give anybody short shrift, and you want to make sure that you discuss every issue about which you have a concern. I mean, don't dominate the conversation, but don't be afraid to bring something up if you don't understand it. As you go through and discuss with your study group, you can hear some questions you can ask. Did you use the same rules? Did you spot the same issues? Did you apply the same facts to the law, and did you to reach the same conclusions? How did your reasoning differ? Which reasoning was better rewarded by the professor? Compare, identify parts of your writing that are strong and parts that need improvement in this way. Also, with study groups, you want to read for organization and readability. This is one of the themes of the class. You want your answers to be organized and you want them to be readable. Because if they're readable and organized, they're easier to grade. So can you label each part of the essay, either your answer or a colleague's answer, with its appropriate Iraq/full part? Does the writer, yourself or others, need to add anything to make the essay more readable? For example, transition words. Should the structure change somewhat? Should you use more parallel structure? Um, and finally, is there any extraneous information that could be deleted? Um, you know, you always want to avoid a rule dump, which is putting every rule related to the area down in a rules section. And in the same way, are you talking about things that don't need to be talked about, either legally or factually? And if so, it's a way of tightening up your writing and improving outcomes for your questions. Let's move on to self assessment. And this is a skill that a lot of people don't acquire, um, either until law school or even later in some instances. Excuse me, self assessment is when you aren't using your study group, you're just using yourself. Um, you want to take a little space. You want to take emotion out of it. Again, take pride out of it. You want to be open to being objective and critical. Don't be overly critical. Don't be overly confident. Be objective as possible. Read your entire essay for organization. This is something that if you're honest with yourself, you will see parts of it that maybe weren't as good as you will be next time. But a way of doing that is to label the parts of your essay: issue, rule, analysis, conclusion, facts, understanding, linking. All of those parts are appropriate. Are you missing any parts? Do you have any extra stuff that maybe doesn't help your answer but confuses the legal analysis instead? So here's where I talk about a model answer. Model answers in law schools, as I've said before, are not a something that I found to be similar to any other proposed answers that I received in my educational experience. A law school, particularly for an issue spotting exam, but a law school model answer is designed to address every issue that could be discussed. Commonly, a model answer is structured that way because for the bar exam, you want an answer that addresses hopefully anything anybody could bring up, so that any appropriate individual could grade it. But the same is true from an explanatory perspective during law school. Looking at model answers gives you a sense not of what your answer should look like. Typically, they are much more involved than you will ever create as an answer. They may have sites in there that you wouldn't recall, for example. But why is that site in there if you aren't going to include it in your answer? Well, it allows you, when you're using the model answer, to find the original material from a case, for example, whatever the site is to, restatement, to objectively compare against your own rules and analysis. So, with a model answer, it's really what you should do is identify the issues that you talked about, see how the model answer talks about them, and compare the two. If your answer isn't as exhaustive, don't worry about it as much. If the analysis and rules are different, that's when I would have a larger concern. If, however, you don't have a model answer, what do? You can check your rules against your outline. How accurately did you state the rule? Does your professor want a verbatim recitation of the rule? If so, did you have a verbatim recitation? Compare your rules against your outline. You want to check your essay against your outline to ensure that you have all the issues in your outline. So, for example, if something in the answer is dealing with a legal issue that you don't have in your outline, but it's one that needed to be addressed in the question, then you have to go and fix your outline. Figure out what you're missing from your outline, improve it, and incorporate that new information. And then practice it. But you want to be able to the way to assess that, if you're missing information, is to compare your essay against the outline, as well as comparing your outline against your essay, in a sense, to ensure that all issues are addressed.